Both film and literature have trained us to be suspicious of artificial intelligence. But the fact is, AI is not science fiction anymore. It's already very much present in our world. AI can now help us to drive our cars, to solve our medical problems, and can even suggest what film we should watch next. There are articles written by robots, films written by machines, and even contemporary pieces of classical music composed by clusters of computers. AI is used daily by film studios and streaming platforms, shifting industry procedures and helping the companies prosper with their suggestions. Data-driven tools can now predict with 85% accuracy what's going to be a box office hit or a flop, or even which project gets a wide release and which plays only at select markets. A movie like Blade Runner probably wouldn't be made today. Its launch in 1982 was a financial disaster, as were other now-cult classics like The Shining. Back then, if studios could have asked one of today's machines to predict their box office, the machine would likely have said, "Don't do it." On the other hand, an AI wouldn't have let Michael Cimino's Heaven's Gate enter production, which could have prevented the end of United Artists and extended New Hollywood's director-driven films. There are many AI game changers like these for the movie business. There are those that can read a script in just a few minutes, analyzing hundreds of parameters from audiences' emotion to characters' journeys, just as a producer and a director used to, but in perhaps 1/50th of the time. Some companies are developing technologies that allow any actor to speak in any language, revolutionizing the dubbing market. AI systems are also used to cast actors for certain roles or to suggest film locations, simplifying production processes. More frighteningly, AI is also being used to bring back some actors from the dead. What's the extent of this revolution? How can independent film companies follow and take advantage of these new technologies? Could artificial intelligence spell the end of independent filmmaking? Or is it a democratization tool bringing new balance between big and small companies? Or will it just widen the gap between them? Furthermore, is AI increasing or decreasing jobs? Is it developing and creating better and more sustainable projects? Wake up, Neo. It's time for answers.
Welcome you all to this conference regarding the future of film. We are going to speak about how will artificial intelligence change the film industry, especially independent film. It's a very important subject, so we invited two guests that certainly will help us to find out more about this subject. I will start to present them. First, we have Sami Arpa. He's founder and CEO of Largo, a Switzerland-based company that provides data-assisted intelligence to audiovisual industry. And we have Tobias Queisser, co-founder and CEO of Cinelytic, a US company based in LA that supports studios and independent content companies to make faster and better informed greenlight acquisition and release decisions. I will start with Sami. He will start talking about what is job and what artificial intelligence can help cinema, especially independent cinema.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here. I will have a presentation. Let me share my screen. We can go over. So, yeah, as Jorge mentioned, we are based in Switzerland. We are a spin-off EPFL, the university that is based in Lausanne. And then the main motivation for us to create Largo and provide this AI support for the movie industry was this overall big change in the industry that you see on this slide as well. We see three important steps in the industry for including AI in the process of filmmaking, film selection, curation. The first very big first step is recommendation systems. That is a big step for the wide usage of AI to match right content with the right audience. And of course, the pioneers of that are Netflix and Amazon. And then we had a big switch to this original content by platforms, starting with around 2013. Again, yeah, through Netflix and Amazon. This has also changed the way we can apply AI in the industry, because before they were having the films, they were having the audience, and they were matching the right film with the right audience. Once you have original content, you can actually even order the right content, because you can know in advance by, again, using the advantage of data AI. You can already know what kind of film that you want to produce, that you want to order. But the problem after that, these big platforms, Amazon and Netflix, are using AI, but their technology data is not accessible to the rest of the industry. That was a problem that we attacked for. We wanted to make this more democratic, open this technology, such data to the rest of the industry as well, not only big players, but also other producers, production houses, independent producers as well. And we think, yeah, this becomes more and more accessible. And in this decade, from big studios to the small independent producers, they will use AI for many of their decisions. And so I will show how our system is working in a few slides. But one thing, I mean, before moving to that, I think we need to also differentiate between these two questions. So because for many producers, for many filmmakers, still AI is something maybe like a robot that will develop their film. It can go over in that direction as well. But as of today, or the technologies that our big players are using is definitely not something similar to that, something closer to that. The main usage of AI and also the right usage for me of AI today is an assistance tool. So it doesn't tell you which content to write, which content to produce. It is rather like a magnifier. It shows which type of it shows the different aspects of your content, how it is relating to the market, how it is relating to previous films, and then this way you can see certain aspects of your film maybe you would miss. So yeah, in thinking what is happening in this decade, the needs of the industry for AI, and also putting this in a format of assistance tool, we created this platform that is called Largo AI. It is a SaaS platform you can access through your web platforms, and it provides you instant results with your movie script or a video input, rough cut, fine cut version of the film, and together with the packaging of the film, you can get story insights about your content, and you can see the market potential of the film at different stages of development, starting from pre-production till the distribution stage. And this is a very strong tool especially for producers, distributors, and financiers, but it's not limited to them. Screenwriters, filmmakers, buyers, sales agents, they also use this tool. And in terms of technology, our core system is this content understanding system, creating the main ingredients of the content by using artificial intelligence, which is our patented technology. And so in this system, basically, you put a script or a video version of the film, and the system creates main cinematographic ingredients of this content. Here we have really a few different ways of looking on that, but you have three examples. One is you see this top graph in the middle, genre analysis. Then we age suitability analysis. On the right, we see like a DNA of the content, which finds the correlation of this content with 1,000 predefined attributes. And then this defines a long, big content in a small set of parameters. And with those, we provide content insights And then again, by using this, we can provide casting propositions. The system automatically provides casting propositions for any actor, any character, sorry. And then it can also provide market forecasts. Like at script stage, the system can predict the potential return of the film in financial means. Yeah, I mean, we can look this part in more detail, but we have a short intro. I will just give you one practical example to make you a bit feel, I mean, how this content insights can be beneficial. Here you see the AI genre results by our system for two different films. The one on the up is Interstellar, and the one in the at the bottom is Nous finirons ensemble, a French and Hollywood film. And here you see the different colors are representing different genres. And then we can also see in a horizontal dimension how these genres are evolving. You see for the second film, we have more comedy drama patterns. Once we come to Interstellar, we have more sci-fi action adventure patterns. But you can also see overall dynamic of the film. In Interstellar, the things are starting more silent. And by section 20, you see there's a big jump. It means there's something important happening over there. So this way, by just looking at this graph, you can interpret what are the important plot points, how is the pacing of the film, many elements you can see just by looking at these graphs. And the other important thing, the system can predict the potential box office results for the film at earlier stage, as I mentioned. This is something I think for independent producers as well, it's a very useful thing to see in advance, because yeah, they are mostly dependent on sales agents or basic comparable analysis, but AI can predict in a much higher accuracy what could be the potential return of the film, and also it shows confidence intervals. So it tells this much revenue, but in worst case, best case, it can go also to certain intervals. One last I want to mention in my intro about this black box side of AI, because AI is some neural network system. It's a black box. It's learning over the concepts that you want to train, but it's always difficult to understand how it learned what it learned. So you can see what it predicts, but why it predicts this, it's always a question. It requires more of the work. Here, I want to share something interesting. We looked in this black box, the box office model for European movies. So we have predictors to see for European movies what kind of box office revenue they can make in different markets. We try to understand which parameters AI is finding more important, why it's making these predictions. There are like over 1,000 parameters. Here you can see budget and P&A are found as the most important parameters that are correlating highly with the financial success. It doesn't mean like having only high budget, high P&A, but right budget and right P&A. The content is following right after these two. But that's really a great indication. I mean, just content itself doesn't mean anything if you don't support it with correct budget and marketing budgets, production and marketing budgets. And these are followed by director, distributor, casting, and screenwriter. So this is a short intro. I hope this gives a bit idea of how our AI system is working in practice.
Thank you very much, Sami, for your insights. We will pass now to Tobias. He's going to do the same thing, I believe. So go ahead, Tobias.
All right, I'm going to share my screen here. Thanks everyone for attending and for having us. Cinelytic, we are similar to Largo, that we are SaaS-based artificial intelligence platform that provides producers, distributors, financiers, marketeers with insight into film business. And but I think our tool is a bit different, but the overall concept that it's a supporting tool is the same. I am the co-founder and CEO. I spent 10 years in finance, where I was very used to investment banking, and I ran a fund where I was very used to content insights, and then I was able to exit and produce films for a couple of years. And while producing films, I realized that it's a fantastic industry, and but what I was lacking was the business insights. And I saw there's a lot of waste, a lot of films, 80% of the films never made it to any screen. And I saw that the insight that I was familiar with in my past life would really help. I partnered with our CTO, who is from NASA, building risk assessment models for launch vehicles and space missions, and another producer of 20 years. Then we have studio executives that worked 15 years in studios that joined us. So we're experts in film and the film industry, as well as in AI and finance technologies. We all came together to build what we built, which I'm going to share a little bit more about. The question, why AI? I think a lot of people in the film industry, as the video showed, are a bit skeptical. They think it takes over creativity. It could be very dangerous. But when you look around in the world, every major company that's successful these days uses AI in their decision making. And therefore, it's very normal to just think of this technology as something that will support you. The way we position our platform is like a supporting platform. It is a tool that guides you. It doesn't make any decision. And we always compare ourselves to something like Google Maps or Waze, for example. I'm sure most of the audience use these tools, so they use AI in their daily life, and it makes it easier, right? It's 10 years ago, you were going around with paper maps and pencil, and when you wanted to go from A to B, there might have been an hour delay, there might be a roadblock, you might have not arrived. And so these days you have tools where they show you the best path and update in sort of in real time. So you always know where you are, how best to get to your destination. And this is how we see ourselves at Cinelytic. We are here to give you the best insights at every step of the process, and help you be as successful as possible. We call it future-proofing. Why the film industry? I alluded that it is a fantastic industry, of course, and it's creative. But if you want to look at this chart for a second, this is the last 10 years of the revenue mix in the entertainment industry in the United States. When you look at this year, 2010, most of the revenues were DVD, that's the light blue line, 16.1 billion, and cinema, 10.6 billion. So if you were an independent filmmaker, or let's say a studio, this was a classic model. It went into theaters, and then went into the home video market, and there was ample revenue, a lot of revenue over these years. So that's why a lot of independent films that were made in the 90s and until 2010 were very successful. Problem was, these revenues were shrinking. DVD revenues are now 3 billion. The cinema was kind of constant, but mostly driven by studio films and no independent film. So the total revenue of the classic model is now far below. Of course, last year was a bit of an exception, but far below where it used to be. That means there's less money to go around in the industry, meaning it's even more risk. Thus, the streaming platforms that came online, and now by far the biggest revenue drivers in the industry, they have a very different business model, and often independent film industry or the general industry, they don't benefit from it. But it used to be largely tech companies. Now studios are in the game as well. But what it means is a lot of change is happening, and therefore it's more important than ever that you know what's going on, that you know which you want to go streaming. Can you sell? Can this be a theatrical? How much money can I make at home video? These questions are very important now because there's just less revenue to go around. Good example is film festival, for example, Sundance. This is 2019, 3 billion worth of content spend were applied to Sundance, but the net revenue, and most of them, of course, go to the festival to get a distribution deal for the United States. But the total number of net revenues, so the revenues that the film might get of the whole independent industry, is 100 million. So you have content spend of 3 billion, while the total revenue in box office for independent film in the United States is 100 million. So again, very tough environment right now for independent film. And we saw a lot of companies go under over the last 10 years, unfortunately. And this is something that we really want to help. So that's why we call it future-proofing. We feel like we built innovative tools that really help with reducing the risk and maximizing value for film. And we want to do this. How do we do this? We bring together a lot of different data sets, meaning box office, home video, TV data, or piracy data, for proxy for OTT, social media data. So anything that's important when you want to make decisions around revenues, forecasting revenues, about talent, about how much money it could make in different territories, what the best release strategy is, in-depth waterfalls to calculate the actual potential profit. So all of this, we bring all of that data into one system, and then because we are experts in the film industry, we know what people do in the studios and what independent producers normally do to assess how much a project could make. We build basic tools that digitize that kind of workflow. So just a quick example. We zoom in here. This is Coda, and an independent film that was actually deemed for the theatrical market and got picked up by Hulu, by Apple in Sundance. But our system predicted, for example, it can predict how much money this will make in the US, box office, home video, TV revenues. And similar, we have a base case, and of course we have a range, which is basically based on confidence levels and probabilities, that you kind of know where your range is, what the most probable scenario is, and then what the outliers are. And then you can assess how much money it's going to make in different territories. If you're a producer, you want to sell your film in different territories, this was very helpful. You understand your talent, how popular, how strong is certain talent in different territories or different genres. All this is there in real time. Release strategies, which type of distributors could buy your content. So really in-depth overview for any producer. I was a producer. I would have loved this information. I didn't have it, and that's why it was tough. And then you can see how much money this film can make in detail. Most importantly, it informs the early stage, because oftentimes when you just use your gut here, when it hits the market, the project falls apart, and that's why 80% of films don't make it to the theater, and only 4% break even. So really bringing the most information into the important early stages. Our models are very accurate. These are a couple of examples that we ran through the system 2 years before the film was actually released, and we could see this was our base forecast. This was what had happened when it released in cinemas. So the overall accuracy was very high. Generally, it's around 85% plus. Streamlining workflow. The nice thing is you don't have to be a math genius or rocket scientist to now do very accurate forecasts. All of this complicated workflow, it takes hours and days, is now doable in 20 minutes in our system. While you, the user, log on and just run all these different forecasts. We work with major studios as well as independent film companies that use our system, and for different, some for releasing. For example, Genius Media, they finance independent film. They use it for validating their investment decisions. And so we work with the majors, but also with the independent industry. And yeah, the data that we use is all not scraped from the internet, but it's data that we actually pay for and have exclusive license agreements with different data providers. And this is how we, at Cinelytic, want to help, or are helping the film industries reduce risk, maximize content, and in the end, future-proof your film, your business, because it's not an easy environment.
Thank you very much, Tobias, for your insights. We will now start with some questions I have to you both. And I will start asking you both regarding data, because we are always talking about data. Can you both say that the streaming platforms are much advanced regarding data that they have to produce these new films that these independent filmmakers that we are talking about?
Well, I think that's the part of the problem. I mean, that's because, we had in the past, once we started at earlier times, we were making only box office predictions. These independent producers, they were coming and telling to us, we go and then negotiate with the streaming platforms, but we don't have any baseline. We don't have anything to compare. They don't provide their data. We don't know anything. So all power belongs to the platforms in that manner. But today, for example, we make streaming predictions, and it's not, although they don't share data, it's not impossible to understand the response to the films on streaming platforms. There is social response, trend responses, many responses, and then AI actually can learn from these responses to have a prediction, have an idea about the streaming results of any film on these streaming platforms. There are, of course, private data sources as well. So in a limited way, they provide some streaming results as the filmmakers, they the producers, they share their deals with the platforms, and sometimes in a limited way, some platforms share some results, but it is still limited that way. But what I'm telling you, AI, if you use it correctly, and you can with some social listening, there's ways still to predict these responses. This is something that we do.
I would just add, yeah, of course, because they have, I mean, the streaming platforms, their advantage is that they have that direct access to the consumer. When you have the direct access to the consumer, you know what they're watching, versus in the traditional model, when you are going to the theaters, you don't know exactly what, because you have to find the real data through these different layers, especially independent film industry. You have the sales agent, the distributor, the marketing. So there are so many layers that keep you from the information, while the streamers have direct access. And then they can, use their eye to crunch numbers. AI is not everything. It's definitely, the data is very important. For example, we have a proxy for streaming, so we can pretty precisely say what works well on Hulu or Netflix, and we can provide our insights, always our customers with insights, whether they want to go theatrical or whether they should go streaming. So it's important to do it, but Netflix, Hulu, they don't share their data, so you have to find the right proxy and then figure out how best to use the data.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. One question that I believe everybody here asks is this technology that you provide cheap to an independent producer?
I would say, it depends. It depends what you say cheap, because you have to see the value, the benefit,
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very important to understand how beneficial it is. We do provide different tiers of pricing, of course, for studios and independents. So yes, we believe we have something that's very appealing to the independent industry, and they also sign up. We have a lot of independent clients, but it's not cheap. It's not like IMDb. It's like IMDb just gives you credits. This gives you insights that are really beneficial to you as a company or as a single producer. We price it at a level that we think it's affordable for the benefit you get, that it helps your success. And that's what I would say. Yeah. So I think it's definitely accessible to the independent film industry. We have a lot of clients. And it's about the understanding, and I guess every company or independent producer has to understand how it can help them to make their own call if they feel it's the right value.
Mm-hmm. And one other question that I would like to ask is, we are talking a lot about this. This is basically math. We are talking about math, and we are talking about something that you refer as a process of creation, art. Some people have some issues with that. What do you have to say to those people to give up of that fear? Because it's a fear when math mixes with art.
I think if I can answer, then I think for us, what our experience was, it's about education. Once you understand what AI does and what the limitations are, which are a ton, because AI is not like a wonder machine that can do everything. AI is very specific, and it can do certain things, and it has great limitations in certain things. We believe at Cinelytic for sure that the creative side, we leave that mostly to the creative people. There are certain things that we can advise in, but we don't see that, for example, AI knows whether it's a good script. It can show you certain things, but it can't tell you this is a great story that people will watch because it connects. The story connects with the human mind, and that we leave to the producer, the creative, to figure out this is a fantastic story. But then the question is, so I have a great story, but how do I bring it to the market? What is the market potential? What's the best strategy? What's the potential distributor, right? Normally you have to ask a sales agent and they charge a lot of money. You have to ask 3 different companies that change it for that information, that charge a lot of money and makes it nearly impossible for the film to recoup any investment. And so this is now putting the information right in the hands of the producer at the early stage, and they understand the market. They understand which charity, they understand which distributor, and now they can understand, okay, this is the creative part, but now I want to understand what's the business side, how can I help with that? And how can I make a story and bring it to theaters in a successful way?
And to Sami, does this data that you have is territorial or is global? For instance, do you have for a small territory somewhere, a guy from India wants to do a film, do you have the data provided to that territory?
Yeah, I mean, as being a European company, we put a big focus in European industry, which is very fragmented. Okay, we have many small markets with different languages, with different market potential. So we cannot, I mean, there are different type of tools. For example, story tools in general, it's global. If you provide them in the languages that system is working with, at this moment, we support 12 languages. Like you can put a Spanish script, French script, or this most of other European languages, the system provides the same insights. And once it comes to market forecast, again, it depends on the tools. So some tools is a bit territory specific. But one thing to provide here, I mean, we are working already with some small countries of Europe very efficiently. At first, we were a bit doubtful as well. We are ourselves is coming with from a very small country. Switzerland is in terms of movie production is extremely small. It's a country with 8 million population and 3 languages. It's also divided by 3 different market response. So of course, yeah, the challenge for AI is higher because there is less data. But yeah, there are ways of learning from this less data. Still a bit, it's still confident way. So we are already working with the producers from different small European countries, which is something we are proud of, because that is something requires significant investment as you localize this to small countries for small industry. But for that, we also get the help of the local institutions, like film institutions, that just to make such technologies available to these local institutions as well, to local community productions as well.
And speaking about those parameters that you have inside the data, you have action, you have like the awards a director has won, the film festival. It's how many parameters can you put there?
So in terms of content description, we have like around 1,000 parameters. And then these 1,000 parameters, it can look small to you, but actually it's a really big dimension. And we can see the way we can understand if it is working well or not, to see if by just defining films with these parameters, if AI can find very good similar films to a content. For example, you just put a script, the system converts this script to these 1,000 parameters, and now from these 1,000 parameters, it can find similar films. Mm-hmm. So it's like a representation of the film in a limited space, but it can already represent it very well, that we can see this with our over many years experience. But these parameters are not fixed also, because as the audience is changing, industry is evolving, we also of course update this baseline.
One thing that is important to say is that also when filmmakers and producers do a film, sometimes they follow some trends from the present. For instance, nowadays we have a lot of diverse actors on the screen. Can a machine have a parameter like that to identify trends of the present?
For the actors, for the casting?
For the actors, for everything. For instance, sometimes we see like 3 movies from the same subject in the same year. So there's a trend. That's course. Also there?
Of course, it's a parameter, one parameter. I mean, we have content parameters, but we have also industry response once we make forecasts for the financial forecast, audience forecasts. So what's going on in one industry? Again, we have these parameters, but what is the response of industry for these parameters is also something important. And sometimes some industries are doing opposite to that. Actually, we just recently we made some presentation for Finnish producers. We analyzed the Finnish film industry to see what is happening. And we saw in last 10 years, they do very much opposite to the trend, what's happening in the trend of Finnish film industry. For example, we see for the Hollywood productions or more international productions, as the level of comedic themes are increasing, and then there is a positive correlation with the higher success. But once we were looking to local Finnish productions, in reverse, they were decreasing the comedy continuously in last 10 years. So of course, and this is a big part of the AI's learning, also predictions. And then it's also, especially for Europe, we see in many local territories, it's not observed, and then people are even doing opposite to what is happening in the trends.
Okay, thank you. Now to Tobias, I would like to ask you, speaking about this process, imagine that I'm an independent producer, I have here a script, and I want to show to your company, so you can say to me if there's a good chance of it. What will be like, do we schedule a meeting, I give you the process, and then a machine starts working about the data? How is the process for an independent producer goes to you?
So we build a system that the user has access. So nobody would submit the project to us. They would just log in the system and then run the project themselves. And so how it would work is that you enter your project and we have certain parameters that you have to enter. And then we have like 4, let's say 5 different tools within the system. And some are like talent. We have a talent packaging tool. We have 700,000 people in the system. Every actor from Europe, India, Japan, America, or director, writer, producer, they're all in there and they're ranked by different statistics. And you can do a lot of research and create your talent list much quicker. So it takes you through the talent side first, for example. Then the next step is we build sort of a Google for film data that we put together a database of 100,000 films that have been released in the last 50 years. And we have a lot of metadata on it, all the revenue numbers, social media, I mean, campaigns, news. It's a very rich data set where the user can then use and find their own comms. This is something which is still semi-manual. You know, you can say, show me all your German-produced thrillers, female protagonists, the last 3 years, and you can create lists and just learn and understand. We then provide forecasts and release strategies for this kind of comms tool. So then it takes you through the comms side. The next step then is our AI tools, where you can then predict your revenue of your film based on certain inputs that we analyzed, and you can predict, let's say, box office, home video, and TV. And so at this point, you know your talent well, you know your release strategies per territory, potential revenues, you know your potential distributors you want to attack, going to get to, you know your potential revenues, and then you can run a full-blown financial model where you can understand how much money you can spend on that film. Is it okay to have a $3 million budget, or does it have to be 2.5? Am I financing with tax credits or pre-sales? How many pre-sales do I have to have? The sales agent says I can get 800,000 pre-sales. So how is my financing mix looking? So there's a very detailed financial model where the producer then can put together a financing package. And then based on this financing package, the system automatically calculates whether there's a profit or loss based on the forecasts, the revenue forecast the system provided. So it's like a process, and that's the beauty of it. We build a methodical process that the producer gets taken through, or, you know, and the producer learns so much about their own project that once they go through it in 20, 30 minutes, they know something like they would have studied a project traditionally for like a week, because it's just so much important information that you receive. And this is kind of the process that the user goes through in the system.
And this tool could help a producer to find finance. For instance, we are talking about data. You can say, with this script, there's this guy over here that usually accepts more these kind of scripts. Can you provide that data to a producer to say, okay, you can co-finance your film over there?
So we don't provide sort of financiers, because as you know, it changes. Like financiers in the film industry come and go very quickly. There are only very few, maybe institutions like in Europe, soft money, you know, government institutions that are here, and we talk to them, of course, because I think it's very beneficial, because what the system allows is to create a very in-depth analysis, which you can export into a PDF. It's like 30 to 50 pages, which gives anybody that reads it, especially financiers, very in-depth business case understanding of what the risks are, and makes it much more transparent. Because the problem is a lot of financiers don't want to invest in film because it's just like a black box. They don't know anything. The producer says, hey, I have this great story and I have 3 comms and this might make a ton of money, but they don't believe it. And with our data, they can really show a very in-depth, detailed understanding, and therefore win over financiers.
You say you find data in everywhere. I think I read an article, when an interview with you, where you said you also will find data in illegal downloads.
Yes.
Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at different ways how to find a proxy for streaming, and we use illegal content consumption, illegal content streaming for a proxy for real streaming, because we saw the correlations are very high, and with this we collect like around 100 million data points a day, every day globally of illegal content consumption, and we can, based on that, understand what people actually watch, because a lot of these films, of course, are Netflix titles and Hulu titles or other home video titles, and this is how we understand the streaming landscape much better.
Mm-hmm. And now for Sami, it's almost the same question that I did to Tobias. Is like for an independent producer that has a very tight budget, how can he compete with the big studio that is going to you with a larger budget? So how can you help a small producer compare with a big studio?
For us, I mean, the service doesn't change much. I mean, we provide big players or independent producers. The difference with the big players, the volume. Okay, they just have more projects, more analysis. For independent producers, they get exactly the same type of the results like these big studios. So in terms of service, there is no difference. And in practice, how it works, I mean, once they have a script, already a version of the script, they can already start to use our system. So, and it's very simple. They come, they upload the script, the system analyzes the script, you get a lot of content insights. And if you have already your early packaging, like if you have an idea, some short list of the casting, your director, all these parameters, you put those as well to get also financial forecast with these parameters. And then process is really to optimize after that your packaging. And if you are still developing your story, that because AI shows a lot of interesting insights, we have many cases like independent producers, they come, they realize actually the story is a bit different than what they have imagined. Because the AI shows these insights, it also gives you a bit of the idea what is how the common audience will perceive your content. So it's an early way, even you can consider like an early test screening to understand a bit the audience reaction, which gives you really time to see your content and update your content with AI. So then, yeah, this is a process. You might change your content, and then you might change your packaging. You just rerun this analysis until to go an optimum. I can give you one example, like a specific number that with a case study we did with European producers. So they had 6 months usage of Largo AI, 22 European producers. We analyzed their usage. So the first day they came to the platform, and then the last day they run an analysis. We checked the difference between first analysis and last analysis and forecast of AI. So there was like 60% improvement in terms of financial forecasts. Well, that is not the real result, but that means really, I mean, they go and they check this AI feedback. They play with their packaging, sometimes a bit with their content to optimize this. And while optimizing, I think here there is also a question about that. There is not a single solution. AI doesn't give you a solution. They need to find the solution, but at least they become aware there is a problem over there.
Speaking like that, is like AI is just a tool. It helps you to make your own decisions, right?
It doesn't tell to you need to change this character to that, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't tell increase the amount of comedy over here, but it shows these graphs to you. You can recognize yourself over these results.
Okay. Did you both? This is a question for both. Did you both note more producers approaching you after the COVID pandemic and the closure of cinemas? Did you notice some kind of difference between the before COVID and after COVID to attention to these details about artificial intelligence in the film business?
From our side, it's too early still, because for movie theaters still closed, opened. I mean, to see the real difference, we should go really like closer to full capacity to have a real understanding for the box office side. Once it comes to streaming, I mean, it's clearly, yes, I mean, there is some inflation because of COVID as well. We can see this in the streaming numbers and also in our forecasts. But for box office, it's I think it's still, at least for our data, it's still early to make a forecast from our side.
And you, Tobias?
Were you asking if the industry participants are more interested in like data and AI now? Is that what, okay.
No, after COVID pandemic and the theaters closed, the industry changed a lot.
Yeah.
If you had more producers to come to you to work with you.
I got the question wrong by the way. So, okay, Tobias, you can answer. I can correct my answer. But yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think generally, I think, COVID has accelerated tech adoption, and that certainly helped because people realized that maybe weren't really familiar with technology, that it can be very beneficial. And then because of the increased risk and I guess also it's even more uncertain, the high uncertainty, I think we definitely felt that there was understanding now that risk reduction is important, that the more they know, the better, and that actually that kind of technology can help. So yes, I feel like there's a shift in mindset that this can really help, and there's maybe less fear. And as I mentioned, the fear is mostly to do with not understanding it correctly, like thinking there's some robot that takes over creativity. But once I understand, it's like similar to Google Maps they use every day, and it just gives them some ideas they can follow. Then I think it's even better. So yes, I think there's an improvement.
My correction with one sentence, I can tell there is, for interest of production side, we can also observe very strong interest if you compare with the pre-COVID time. I mean, people are much more open, I would say.
Okay. Another question that I have, that is a question everybody asks when robots appear at the question, robots. Does this take human jobs? Are human jobs becoming obsolete? Can we rely on humans after AI gives this data so well?
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is only informing. You still have to drive the project. It still needs a good producer that understands whether the story really hits home with people, really, and somebody that knows how to guide a project from the early stage to, it has to have all the sales digit even to do the sale, maybe at a lesser fee, but still people connecting. So I think it doesn't, and actors have to act. I mean, going forward, maybe in 30 years, there's more AI in the creative business, and maybe it's a little bit different, but I think, of course, this is just a supporting tool. So we always say it actually helps the producer or the company or studio we work with to future-proof them, be more successful, and therefore actually make sure the jobs are safe. That's kind of where I see it. If you reduce risks, the jobs are safe, and I think so. It definitely helps for that component.
I agree completely with Tobias. Actually, it is saving the jobs because I mean, well, the overall cake is the same. Okay, it has to be shared by the market. Maybe it's growing slowly over the years, but I think with AI, potentially this will be shared a bit more fairly because more people have access to such technologies, such data. That means they can make also their risk assessment. So in that manner, I also don't see that it will reduce the jobs, but it will actually save the jobs because if you can make your risk assessment correctly, and if you can grow your production company, that means having the jobs longer time and for more people. And if as we mentioned, the AI with the current process, it doesn't replace with like any specific person. Okay, so it's still a tool for these people to use for their own process.
Mm-hmm. One of the biggest problems around here is that we start using that word that Martin Scorsese hates, is content. We're speaking about content, we don't speak anymore about films, we speak content of this, and then we have a pile of content everywhere. Does that bother to you, that word content, or is it just business nowadays?
It's just because, these days, is content, because episodal films, episodal TV, what do you want to call it, episodal or TV? In the old days it was TV. Now the streamers have like have a film with a miniseries with 3 episodes or 8 or 10, and the quality of the creativity in the miniseries sometimes is as good as in a cinema film. So because we just use content, because in the end, whether it's film or episodic, it's content for us. But yeah, it's still, when you want to define it, film is still film. But content is just that it's an overriding. If you talk about streaming world and film, then content is the more suitable expression.
So the data, it's based on a success, not in a good idea. Is there a way that the AI identifies a good idea?
Good next ideas?
No, because this is all based on success,
Yeah,
and not
well,
a good idea or a new idea.
well, not only success, I would say, but also a lot of failures, because most of the previous data is failure. I mean, success is less than failures. And the good idea, I think one thing, well, it depends on how you design AI. So AI doesn't necessarily has to just repeat the past, because we talk about trends. Trends, what is the trend about? Trend is not the average of the past. Trend is showing actually what is the next step. So if you see, for example, like a drama in certain territory, as you increase drama, the response is increasing. The next step could be increasing drama even further, not just repeating the average from the past. And this is, if you design actually AI in a good way, AI is supposed to learn these trends and actually also tell you the, give you the insights for the next step, not just repeat the average of the past.
Yeah, and I think if I can jump in, also good idea. I don't know what is a good idea. Is it like a log line of 2 sentences? Is it a script of 90 pages? Right. Of course, the creative, I would say, origination has to be still human. You know, you have to come up with something that's really great, but then you can learn and figure out, okay, I got this. You know, story in the end, there are a lot of comparables in story. Story is not just like everybody says every film is different, but it's not true. You can find very great similarities among certain very different films. And that's what the data can help. You have a great idea, and then you can kind of verify with the data and give you confidence and forecast whether it is a good idea. But in the end, the creation origination has to come from the human.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot originate too much, because then we get into the field. You know what the film industry did, sorry, just to jump in, a lot was like prequels and sequels and all that kind of stuff. And then you get into just repeating the past. What RAI is actually doing, we try to help give more confidence to original content, meaning films that actually were tough to forecast. Now you can forecast them and give more confidence for original content, that you don't have to rely on the sequel, the prequel, and whatever every franchise. But your origination, I would say, has to be. I don't know. If you have AI that just spits out good ideas or like log lines or good, you know, potentially in the future. But I think so far it's the human that has to come up with a creative spark.
And that machines can decide if a project is better for TV or for cinema, for instance, or streaming.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and since traditionally France is one of the countries that most resist to these changes of windows, of streaming everything, did you find any country, area in the world with some more resistant to this idea of AI in the movie business?
Well, I can tell from our side, I mean, of course, every country has a different response. But one thing for us that was surprising, well, France is one of them, but I would say also Europe in general compared to US is more traditional, more art house focused. We were thinking maybe we would have, at the start of our journey, we will have more resistance for that, but we were wrong. I mean, in Europe, I mean, we had really, the industry has been really open, and then we developed very fast in Europe. Once we go to country by country, France, I mean, we work with many producers in France, but maybe it is a bit slower compared to the size of the French industry once we compare with other markets in Europe, because French is one of the leading industry in Europe. Compared to its size, maybe it is a bit slower compared to other countries, but not too much in our experience.
And speaking about the diversity question that I asked before, there's a question for the audience. If the machine can pass the Bechdel test, for instance, the diversity issue.
I mean, from our experience, when we forecast film, diversity, the system is much more neutral than the industry used to be. So, you know, in the old days, we were tastemakers, and it was very much one-sided because the tastemaker was a certain type. But the good thing is our data takes, of course, the most recent data into account of forecasting. And so we were actually, when I look at our forecasts, we forecasted films with diverse actors or diverse stories very highly, and we were right, because these stories do very well these days. And so I think a tool like ours, which is very neutral with the new data, is actually is good for diversity, because it really shows and takes out human bias, which was holding back a lot of diverse films over the last in the older times. And now with more the diverse stories being very, very strong, it actually shows that in our forecast as well.
We do something specific on that purpose. For example, we do not provide ethnicity information of the actors to AI on purpose, so that AI doesn't learn the current bias of the industry. Because in our, I mean, we look at some specific example. For example, AI is proposing 3 times more Black actors than what is happening in the industry. Once we look at the specific numbers, this is for many ethnicity. It's this way, and it is. In a way, also, we don't provide this ethnicity information, because as soon as we provide it, might learn the same pattern, actually, what human was practicing in the past. There is this kind of danger as well.
Speaking about this, when we talk about actors, you probably, if you have like, imagine that you have a film like Blade Runner, he probably will say that you should put Vin Diesel doing the first performance, because Fast and Furious was a success. Do you think that that could lead producers to some kind of mistakes, or that the machine can quite predictly in some more parameters than money at the box office, for instance? If Vin Diesel works well in sci-fi, for instance.
I mean, I think for especially actors part, eventually AI again brings you some different type of options that you need to make your selection, or might have some different angles of the connection with your content. But here, I think one thing, which is what is happening in the industry for the casting, there is like a narrow clusters of actors, like some A-list actors, some important names, celebrities that they are repeating very often in the industry, which makes young actors, more or less experienced actors, which makes the job very difficult for them to take a position in a film. We also wanted to measure with AI that to see if AI is having the same behavior to repeat really the same cluster of the actors. Again, this European study I was referring before in Q&A, these 22 European producers, they had 80 movies. In these 80 movies, we saw AI has proposed 1,000 different actors for 80 movies as really very strong matches. That shows, I mean, it can find a really different way of connecting some successful actors from different options, because 1,000 actors is really huge. If it was creating some small clusters, again, it will repeat the same actors in the industry. In that way, we can see it's also democratizing and creating more opportunity for different talents.
Yeah, we see the same. I mean, a lot of our clients use actually our tool in the packaging to get different ideas, because it's always the same people or 5 people on the list. And of course, if it's more a drama-heavy film, nobody would, I mean, I wouldn't say anything about Vin Diesel not being a good drama actor, but he's typically an action actor. So you know, nobody would cast him in a drama. And Harrison Ford already at Blade Runner, he was a well-known actor. He did Tomb Raider, he did Star Wars, and he wasn't a nobody. He was he was a leading man, and I think it's the same thing now. I mean, of course, there are certain actors that are more valuable and they draw audiences, and that's very natural. But it depends on which way your budget is. I mean, you wouldn't get such a person a $2 million film. So what is the level of actor you can get for a $2 million film? And then you can get a great selection based on the data, and these people can actually realistically approach, rather than having like the top 5 people on it. If it's a $200 million Hollywood production, then you have to think of course, very strongly who's the right person. But even there, they go looking for a certain type of actor, and then you can broaden that spectrum.
Mm-hmm. Another question from the audience. Will films look very similar going through AI, removing the dareness of a few films? Since they are going to say that a film is successful because he has 30% action, 40% love, do you feel that movies will going to be like the same?
I think no, because I mean, even I see these genre patterns. AI doesn't tell which kind of genre patterns to create. For example, it should be 30% this, 40%, etc. And the other thing, what we see, I mean, this is a bit also similar to musical notes. Like with 3 chords, you can create like thousands of songs. The same type of genre patterns, you can create many different type of films, completely different story, completely different contents. This is really a high level representation of the content. But again, here, the one important thing, again, AI doesn't give the direction. You see these percentages of these contents, then it's up to you. What is the next step? I mean, in our tool, normally we have the chance to compare these patterns with some previous films. If you have some other films in your mind that you find in terms of these genre patterns to be similar, you can compare with that. Or if you want it to completely different with any film in the past, then you just compare again with the patterns of these previous films. You try to make this pattern different. So it's really up to you how to use these patterns, and AI doesn't tell you should put into certain shape.
Speaking about AI and the ethics behind it, it's a very specific question regarding the usage of Anthony Bourdain's recently released voice in the documentary. Using words that he never say, it was possible because of AI. Is there a line when you are using AI that you have put a line to what will you do or not?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think maybe regulation is catching up with AI because it's a very fast-moving subject, but generally we are behaving very ethically because we see the problems that appear when you don't. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of creating and taking somebody who's dead and who has a lot of IP and was a very certain character and then put words in his mouth. I don't think that's the right approach.
Yeah, this is a different area of the application, and it's coming strongly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, since we have not researched really the market response for that, I don't know for post-production level at a different level how the industry is perceiving this. I think it looks like it will be used more, but I really don't have any like a specific analysis on that on the market response. So that's why I cannot respond confidently in this.
And speaking about the ethics too and moral, you guys go grab a lot of data. Where does that data come from? Because nowadays our information is everywhere, and sometimes we don't even know we have the Cambridge Analytic problem and everything. You get that data from where specific? For instance, Tobias told that he bought some data from someone. Where does that data come from?
So we have data license agreements. So there are certain providers of certain data points, whether it's Rotten Tomato or box reviews or home video or TV numbers or social media data. And we just talk to these companies, we make a deal, we pay the money, and they deliver the data via API to us. API means in basically like a real-time data host. And this data is it's industry standard. We look for the best data, and that's a very important thing. Of course, we look out that we don't infringe on any data protection rights and all these things, so that we of course vet with every data set.
Same thing for us. I mean, we have our data partners, we have our own data, like we have our own TV channel, for example. We also collect data from those. And then there is also some type of the public data, as like a Google using and then providing some results that you can use also some of this public data, especially for this trend streaming forecast. That is the way to reach and assess the data and make these predictions. I think one thing here, so personal data, yes, is always a problem. There should be some regulations for that, and there is, I think, in Europe is strong. But non-personal data for AI learning, to keep this free for the industry usage, open for industry usage, is very, very important. Not specifically for film industry, but for everything. For the overall development of the industry, for health industry, for autonomous driving, for other parts. And in general, the courts so far, they decide in the favor of the public data for the usage of AI, which is actually, if it's not allowed, we couldn't even use the Google, because what Google does eventually is with its own AI analyzing some public data and then bring you some insights over that. So AI is learning from the public data, and to keep this accessible is, I think, very important for any industry's rapid evolvement. But of course, I don't talk about like personal data. Personal data, it is important to protect, and then of course there should be good limitations for the usage of AI on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. I have one more question for both. What's the next step for your companies in this business?
Well, yeah, for us, sorry, you want to go first, Tobias?
No, you
Okay.
can.
Yeah, for us, I mean, we had big goals for Europe, to spread this Europe as much as possible in different countries. Now, I mean, we opened the system even some small European countries. Now we open it even further, even some smaller European countries. So we collaborate also with, as I mentioned, local institutions to make it possible. That's one important thing. And then we also we recently launched the system also for TV series. So we will provide also the service more broadly for broadcasting and TV as well.
And Tobias?
Yeah, I mean, we're expanding geographically, and then also on different tools, you know, from film to streaming, and there's some other potential verticals that we get in. So basically growing and expanding the current business, and then going to different verticals in the entertainment industry.
Mm-hmm. And do you have a special message to the producers that are hearing us? So how can they make it their business better with your company or Sami company?
I think, I mean, I used to be a producer myself, right? And when I produce films, I realized that as a producer, you very much live on this isolated island, or that's basically you're the one that has to carry a project from the very beginning to the very end, but very often you walk in fog. You have a great creative plan about how to produce it on set and all this, but then really the clarity to your end market, like which market, which distribution strategy, which distributor, is he spending enough P&A? Is he spending too much P&A? All these questions, as a producer, you always led to these companies. Like, that I have the distributor decide, but the distributor is not aligned with you. I have the sales agent decide. The sales agent has its own business model, or the company's own business model. So in that value chain where there's so many companies between you and the market, the more you know, the better you can steer your project towards the market, and the better, if the less external companies need to get involved, the more you save also fees on the recoupment. So I think the more data and information you have, the better, because it's becoming more and more important that you as a producer understand the ad market, understand what your film is as sort of a product, and how best to make it a success creatively, but also economically or financially.
Mm-hmm.
And one more thing, you want to bring it to a screen, because 80% of the films unfortunately never get to any screen, right? And that's a waste. So that can help really to get your film to a screen.
Thank you, Tobias. Sami, do you want to add anything?
No, thank you very much. It has been very fun discussion, and then I see there is a great interest from the audience as well. So if anybody is interested with this AI tools, please contact to us.
Okay, thank you very much to all for your presence at this conference. We will be back tomorrow with 2 more sessions, one about the virtual production revolution that is coming and about blockchain, and it will be a giant leap for the film industry. Thank you all and have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.